Have you ever danced so hard you thought you might die? Probably not literally, right? But what if I told you that in the year 1518, an entire town was gripped by an uncontrollable urge to dance? A dance so relentless that it led to exhaustion, heart attacks, and even death. This isn't the plot of a horror movie. It's the true and bizarre story of the dancing plague of Strasbourg. Imagine this. It's a hot July day in the city of Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire. A woman, known to history as Frau Trophia, steps out of her home and into the street. But she's not going to the market or visiting a neighbor. She begins to dance. There's no music, no celebration. Just her moving silently and fervently under the summer sun. Her husband and neighbors watch, first with curiosity, then with concern. They plead with her to stop, but she can't, or won't. This isn't a joyful jig. It's a desperate, twitching, non-stop marathon. She dances for nearly a week, her feet swollen and bleeding, until she finally collapses from sheer exhaustion. You'd think this would be the end of a very strange, isolated incident. But it was only the beginning. Within a week, a few dozen others had joined in. They weren't dancing with Frau Trophia, they were dancing on their own, a city of solo performers locked in a grim, silent disco. The city's leaders were baffled. What was happening? In a decision that, in hindsight, seems incredibly misguided, the civic and religious authorities consulted local physicians. Their diagnosis: this wasn't a supernatural curse, but a case of hot blood. Their prescription: more dancing. Yes, you heard that right. They believed the dancers needed to sweat out the fever, so the city council took action. They cleared out two of the largest guild halls, set up a stage in the grain market, and even hired professional musicians and paid strong men to hold the dancers upright so they could keep going. They essentially organized a rave for people who were already dancing themselves into the grave. As you can probably guess, this cure was a complete disaster. The public spectacle only seemed to make the plague spread faster. The sight of people dancing uncontrollably in the streets, with musicians egging them on, drew more and more people into the bizarre frenzy. At its peak, it's estimated that as many as 400 people were caught in the grip of this dancing mania. The city chronicles are chilling. They describe people dancing day and night, their bodies racked with spasms, their faces contorted in agony. They couldn't stop to eat, drink, or sleep. The constant motion led to dehydration, strokes, and heart failure. Some reports claim that, at its worst, the plague was killing up to 15 people every single day. So the big question is, why? What on earth could cause hundreds of people to dance themselves to death? For centuries, this has been one of history's most perplexing medical mysteries, and there are several compelling theories. Let's start with the most popular scientific explanation: ergot poisoning. Ergot is a type of fungus that grows on damp rye, which was a staple grain for making bread at the time. This fungus contains psychoactive chemicals, and if ingested, it can cause a condition called ergotism. The symptoms are terrifying. They include muscle spasms, convulsions, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs. This sounds a lot like what the Strasbourg dancers experienced, doesn't it? The spasms could easily be interpreted as dancing. This theory suggests that the entire town was essentially and accidentally on a very, very bad trip. However, there's a problem with this theory. While ergotism causes convulsions, it doesn't typically lead to the kind of coordinated, sustained dancing described in the historical accounts. Also, it often causes gangrene, which restricts blood flow to the limbs, making dancing for days on end physically impossible. This leads us to the second major theory, which points not to a physical poison, but a psychological one: mass psychogenic illness, or what used to be called mass hysteria. To understand this, we need to look at the world of 1518. Life in Strasbourg was brutal. The people were suffering from widespread famine, poverty, and disease. Smallpox and syphilis were rampant. This was a population living on the edge, under immense and prolonged stress. Their lives were filled with hardship and a deep, fervent belief in the supernatural. They believed that saints could bless them and just as easily curse them. One particular local belief was that a saint, Saint Vitus, could punish sinners by inflicting a compulsive, uncontrollable dance upon them. According to this theory, Frau Trophia might have started dancing due to extreme personal stress. When others saw her, their own stressed-out, highly suggestible minds latched onto this behavior. In a community primed by fear and superstition, the sight of one person dancing uncontrollably could have acted as a trigger, sparking a chain reaction. It became a social contagion. The dancing wasn't a symptom of a physical illness, but a physical manifestation of extreme psychological distress. It was an outlet, a trance-like state to escape the unbearable reality of their lives. The authorities' decision to encourage the dancing only validated the phenomenon in the public's mind, making it spread even further. Imagine the psychological pressure. You're starving, you're scared, and you see your neighbors being cursed to dance. The fear of being next could, paradoxically, be the very thing that makes you start dancing too. After several weeks of this deadly festival, the authorities finally realized their more dancing cure was a catastrophic failure. They changed tactics completely. They banned all public music and dancing. The dancers were rounded up, put into wagons, and taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, high in the mountains. There, they were made to pray for absolution. The priests performed rituals, and the dancers were given small wooden crosses and red shoes. Slowly, over the next few weeks, the dancing began to subside. By early September, the plague was over. The town returned to a stunned, exhausted silence. Did the religious intervention work? Or did the plague simply run its course? It's hard to say. For those who believed in a supernatural cause, this was proof that the curse of St. Vitus had been lifted through prayer. For a modern psychologist, it might look like the change in environment and the introduction of a new, powerful belief system helped to break the trance-like state of the dancers. It gave them a new focus and a ritual to channel their energy into effectively breaking the psychological feedback loop. The dancing plague of 1518 wasn't a one-off event. There were other, smaller outbreaks of dancing mania throughout medieval Europe, but the Strasbourg case is the most famous and well-documented. It remains a powerful and unsettling reminder of the profound connection between the mind and the body. It shows how social, psychological, and environmental pressures can combine to create bizarre and tragic outcomes. It's a story about a town under so much stress that its collective mind simply broke, expressing its trauma in the most public and physical way imaginable, a dance of death. It's a bizarre chapter of history that feels almost too strange to be true, yet it happened. It forces us to ask what we might be capable of under extreme pressure. What strange forms might our own collective anxieties take? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to 1518. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more dives into historical mysteries, and let me know in the comments which theory you find most convincing. See you next time.